Thanks. Okay, so I'm just going to read the beginning of an essay that I started at the beginning of the summer. Yes, it's not done. Floriography study number 1, the hydrangea. By the end of June, my hydrangea stole the peak of summer nostalgia. It was the season of drowning rain, high temperatures, and the great dragonfly migration. What was once an ethereal purple hydrangea transformed into a hybrid scheme of purple and pink blooms, much like the arc of a gasoline rainbow. Last summer, the plant began to shift its color, and now it's a new entity entirely. Color manipulation became an interest of mine, so I collected various spetals from the mop heads and began to inspect them delicately, as if they were the sad, newly laid eggs of a robin's predetermined abandonment. The cause of a hydrangea's color change is the pH levels of the soil, and this is determined by the temperature and rainfall amounts. A level of 0 to 5.5 makes the flowers blue, 5.5 to 6.5 makes them purple, and 6.5 to 14 makes them pink. I arranged my evidence of various hydrangea bits in ascending order by pH level, which I could only guess after careful comparison of the variation of hues. With much pleasure, I scotch taped them to a notebook and thought about what I should say that I haven't already said about memory. Around this time, seasonally, the rambling rose crawls up the front door and blooms with the fuchsian punch. Although the rose's ascent occurs in the present tense, it will already be dead, burnt and dry by the time you read this, which makes the detail of color a memory. Memory is what I'm here for, to recall my origin story. I remember a voice in the dark said, "You need to make yourself happy." The hydrangea asks nothing of us, yet we perpetually gawk. In spite of this dilemma, there is still my current reality, how every entry and departure of my home is embedded with color, which alters the land into an altar adorned with flowers. It was made a place of worship by natural causes, but it was not man-made. The truth is, my home is stuck in summer, and all is brilliant between the gods and me. Hydrangeas initiate fantasy about desirable human experiences because their colors and shapes exemplify the natural world. They remind me I am lucky. When I see a hydrangea, I see a bit deeper, through the nucleus of each raindrop so carefully strung along the tips of its rounded, slightly heart-shaped leaves, water rusting like a necklace strung of glass beads. This plant has turned me into a romantic. I start to consider conditional statements to incorporate logic, so people don't think I'm overly sentimental. My first condition is as follows. If a plant can visually transform due to external conditions, then maybe I can too, unless some traits are genetically predetermined, which in that case, I am mortal, just as the white hydrangea is only white. So there's always analogy. I am in the season of not turning back, but I intend to turn back into what I was meant to be. What was blue was never meant to stay blue, but blue is at the core of everything. This is to say I'm in the middle of my life, and the precious acceleration of childhood has left me afraid. I think my whole life was a big fat imagining, some image reflected on the dome of a spoon. Not a botanist nor intuitive with plants, the survival of my hydrangea is a miraculous marvel in and of itself. My grandparents previously owned my home. They bought it in 1974, back when it was just a plot of land. The driveway was vertically bordered by a vivacious flower garden. All of the flowers were planted and cared for by my grandfather. He took pride in the abundance of color, for it was hard to remain emotionally hardened while looking at it. Strangers drove by in the summer months to admire and offer up their Venusian awe, while others thieved a few glorious dahlias to only have them wilt and die on their kitchen counter by the following day. Our house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, so non-residential traffic is rare. If my grandparents heard or saw an unknown car approach, either someone was lost, turning around, or the garden enchanted and lured them here. Beauty in the natural world is pure and hard to ignore. Flowers, earthborn organisms with a history of glorified antiquity, are gifted to allure love or affection from others, as well as to bestow it. Love always wants something to love. My grandfather knew whenever a flower was missing because his olfactory senses were sensitive to floral fumes, and every plucked blossom affected the overall scent of the garden. Yes, there were many species of flowers, but the lot was still a single garden. In order for me to relive my experiences of childhood, it is essential that I question the reasons why I love what I love. At some point in history, flowers became symbolic for human sentiment in connection with intimacy, attraction, and attachment. While the obvious splendor of flowers satisfies as reason enough, I suspect there's more to this association, just as I suspect there's more to be discovered in regards to my affinity to the hydrangea. The presence of the hydrangea smooths over my saddest parts like a round wave over splotches of pebbles in the sea. The tradition of giving flowers is an ancient one, as earliest evidence exists within painted walls and tombs of Egypt. Additionally, the ancient Greeks, who used flowers to adorn triumphant athletes and crown immaculate brides, developed a language of flowers, otherwise known as florography, in which each flower designates a particular sentiment or human emotion. Flowers have also maintained an ever-present role in religious and spiritual services, practices, and rituals, distinguishing them as offerings and adornments for the divine. The bondage of flowers to love emerged from assorted mythologies, including the legend of Chloris, who was a Greek nymph of flowers. One myth declares that Chloris is altered into the goddess of spring, Flora, by the breath of her husband, the wind god Zephyrus. Roman mythology regards Chloris and Flora as separate divinities. Spring, the cyclical pattern of nature, and new life are a few ways the work of Chloris appears in our lives. The first rose was spawned from the lifeless body of a nymph through the powers and empathy of Chloris. Chloris was assisted with the help of Aphrodite and Apollo, and the rose was named after the son of Aphrodite, Eros, or the god of love. Hence, from its conception, the rose was synonymous to the sentiment of strong affection. Early Renaissance Italian painter Sandro Botticelli depicts Chloris in his mysterious masterpiece, Primavera, with a garland of wild flowers dripping out of her open mouth and down her shock-stricken face. The vine gracefully bleeds into the goddess Flora, whose entirety is adorned in various flowers. Within the painting are over 500 plant species, ranging from daisies, forget-me-nots, strawberries, and cornflowers, and many of the flowers depicted no longer exist in our contemporary world. Botticelli's depiction has led to various interpretations, but there's no justification for having spring ejected from the body and out the mouth. Chloris will forever adorn the earth with flowerets. Space will forever adorn the sky with celestial beings. Humans will forever adorn memory with elegy. Poet Rick Barrett accurately explains in Elegy that, quote, "the day will only want to keep arriving," end quote. There's not much to figure out once you accept that. My curiosity with the hydrangea is connected to my curiosity regarding who or what made the hydrangea. While the color of the hydrangea can be explained through aluminum ions, the creation of the hydrangea requires imagination. I chose the hydrangea as my initial florography study because its vibrancy became emblematic of summer. Summer keeps me. All over New England, the hydrangea was celebrated and adored like a celebrity. The name hydrangea comes from the Greek word hydro, or water, and angion, or vessel. Perhaps the need for frequent watering influenced the shrub's name, or maybe it was its body. If I didn't water the hydrangeas, the earth did it for me. Either way, I'm not certain who kept them alive. Hydrangea clusters appropriately resemble globular amphoras, and not the type depicted on Orthodox icons of the wedding at Cana. While its shape of leaves creates a circular shape, the actual flower is located in the center of rounding, as if each cluster was actually a fortress of leaves. The little parts collectively protect the most tender spot as if it were a gathering of paper-thin buttons. Even the Old Testament alludes to the symbolism of flowers, most famously in the lyrical book, Song of Solomon. The book mentions roses, lilies, cloves, fig trees, saffron, spikenard, and cinnamon, among other flowers and flowering plants. Consider the King James translation of Psalm chapter 2, verse 11, quote, "For lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land. The fig tree ripeneth her green figs, and the vines are in blossom, they give forth their fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away," end quote. The depiction is synchronous with passion, so strong even the turtle makes a sound. After my grandfather passed away, some of the plants survived him, such as the overgrown grapevines, the pear tree, the Althea hibiscus, the crabapple tree, some miniature daffodils, and the rambling rose continually drenched in harsh sunlight. But the hydrangeas are newer. My father planted them 3 years ago. He dug a hole like a grave for a rabbit and flattened the dirt like an earthen dough. The shrubs were young then. There was no assurance they'd survive. My love for flowers has been central to my joy since childhood. My diaries were graffitied with daisies and clovers and the same single-stemmed rose. Because of this, perhaps this meditation on the hydrangea is indirectly an investigation to the cabinet of my psyche, the organizer of the disordered narrative of my life. The narrative is in the death, and life is in the art. The drawers where I clustered my memories were always present, but not exactly accessible. As mentioned earlier, all flowers soothe the tender spot in the body code of me, but hydrangeas, any hue from pink August to purple July, are particular to me. This is a secret I pulled from the deep shadows of my ribcage, and the corums rattled like bells in a hidden pocket of my eternal life, the one I was promised. And this is the last part I'll read. Some call this possession, then I am possessed by flowers, and my duty rests in my righteous submission to the one who is named Hortensia, the name built diligently by a heavenly garden bee.
All right.